Thank you, Chairman. We are now live streaming.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Brookland Council's virtual planning committee meeting for today. This meeting will be live streamed on the council's social media channels and will be recorded. Once you join the meeting, please remain on mute, which avoids any unnecessary background noise disturbing the meeting. Controls to mute and unmute are displayed on your screen. At the end of this presentation, I will get Julie Britton, the Democratic Service Officer, to take the roll call to confirm attendance. Could you please ensure that you unmute your microphone before speaking to confirm attendance, and then mute your microphone, as no response will assume that a planning committee member is not in the meeting. Each application has an allotted time slot. There may be an occasion when the time runs over, and therefore attendees will remain in the waiting room until such time their application is ready to be heard. If for any reason the discussion finishes earlier than the time slot given, the meeting will be paused. I will work through the agenda, inviting the ward member, applicant, etc. to introduce and speak on each item as appropriate. Attendees for each application will be held in the waiting room until such time the application is heard. Ward members in attendance who have registered to speak on an application will be asked to speak last. A speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes, or in the case of more than one objector or supporter wishing to speak, up to a maximum of 3 minutes in total will be needed to be shared. Where an applicant and an agent intend to speak, the 3 minutes is split between the two, other than when speaking. Speakers will remain on mute. If you try to speak when not invited to, you may be required to leave the meeting. I will then check with the Democratic Service Officer in attendance. If there are any members who wish to ask a question, please do this clearly by raising your hand, and please remain on mute until invited to speak. I will seek declarations of interest in the usual manner. Members with a declaration should indicate this by raising their hand. The Democratic Service Officer in attendance will invite the councillor to unmute and declare their interest to the chairman. This councillor will at the relevant time be removed from the meeting and placed in the virtual waiting room until discussion and voting on that item has been completed, after which they will return to the meeting. Once the application has been discussed and all questions answered, the Democratic Service Officer will then invite each councillor to speak in turn. If a member should experience IT issues during the presentation and does not ask for it to be repeated, they will be unable to vote on the application. For each item, all members will need to confirm that they have heard the application in full before the vote is taken. I'll now call on Julie to do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkin.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Here.
Councillor Atterwill.
Here.
Councillor Bowes.
Here.
Councillor Brame.
Here.
Here.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen.
Here.
Councillor Harry Clark.
Here.
Councillor Crane.
Here.
Councillor Dale. Councillor Dygan.
Here.
Councillor Gilbert.
Here.
And Councillor Martin.
Here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I go to item 1, which is the minutes, please. I trust you've all read them and accept them. Unless anyone has a problem, we will take them as read. Okay, those minutes are agreed. Thank you. Number 2, apologies and substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have an apology from Councillor Vera Dale, and Councillor Robert Kybird is in attendance as her substitute.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Kybird, for joining. Item 3, declarations of interests and or representations received. I will take them as each item is raised. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. Nothing to say apart from, yes, we are still virtual, and at this moment in time, I can't see us being back in the room for a considerable time. So we will stay on screen. So there'll be TV stars for just a little bit longer. Item 5, request to defer applications. Do I have any, Rebecca?
None today, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And also on to item 6, urgent business. Do you have any items you wish to raise?
Not today, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have,
Sorry,
Councillor
Chairman.
Clark.
Yeah.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, I was going to come in under your announcement section. Whilst not desperately urgent, it just occurred to me, having been on the committee for some considerable time now, we are now only getting the more difficult, controversial and applications which are contrary to policy at the full committee, with much more being delegated to officers. I will be sending around a paper to yourself and officers and other members suggesting potential reviews to the time limits to applicants and objectors, because sometimes with larger applications, it might be a small application or a large application, they're treated equally in terms of the time limit. I don't have a view on it, but I will be just sharing that with the members of the committee, you know, to advise you and given our thoughts accordingly. Thank you, Chairman.
When you say time limit, do you mean time limit speaking at the meeting? Is that what you're saying, time limit?
Yes, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, well, I have extended times now and again, depending on the application and the size of the application, but it's something I do cautiously because I don't want the meeting to be too repetitive. I do find that a lot of time if I extend too much time, I end up.
I wasn't doubting your normal generosity and forbearance in this matter to all applicants and supporters and objectors alike. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, but all I would say at any time is that if any member has an issue like that, by all means contact me and I will deal with it between us before I take any further. Thank you. Number 7, item number 7 is local plan update. We have Simon Wood, our Director of Planning here. Over to you, Simon, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I've actually got nothing to update at this moment in time, though I would say that there are 2 consultations out from the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government. One is in relation to the National Design Code and resultant potential changes to the NPPF, and the other is in relation to new homes bonus. We're also going through a consultation process under Regulation 19 of the Act in relation to the Greater Norwich local plan as well, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions at all? Councillor Attawell.
Thank you, Chairman. Once again, I'm going to ask Councillor Simon Wood, what is the situation with the local plan steering group? I'm now getting correspondence sent to me from communities outside of my ward. That's not my remit. I don't feel to respond to them. They are asking what is going on with this local plan working group. And I really feel that keep putting this off. There's over 6 months now since that group met. We've got an awful lot of work we need to get through, some important stuff. And I'm disappointed that we just seem to be in a situation at the moment when nobody really knows what's happening with that, how we sort of going forward, because I think we all want to see the review. People want to feed into it. So any update when the local plan working group is actually going to meet, please?
Thank you, Councillor. No, I have no update as to when the local plan working group will resume. What I'm able to say is if you wish to send me any correspondence that you have, I'm quite happy to respond to it appropriately.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that response, Simon. Okay, we're going to item 8, which is deferred applications, and we're going to take one of our deferred items, which is Durham at Westfield Road, and the application number 3PL 2019-1526D. And I hand over to Rebecca Collins, please, for the presentation.
So please find in front of you the presentation. We're at Durham. This is land off Westfield Road in Durham. It's a reserve matters application for 100 dwellings following the grant of planning permission, outline planning permission on the site that's outlined red on your screens in front of you. So here is the application site outlined in red. It includes the 2 front properties which front onto Westfield Road. You can see there to the left hand west of your screen within the red line boundary, one of which is to be demolished to provide access to the application site, and access was a matter approved at reserve matter stage. You'll also know the land ownership outlined in blue just to the southwest of the application site, which has become a pedestrian access to the site, and you'll see that on the layout. Here is the application site clearly within the settlement boundary for Durham, but the principle is obviously already established by the granting of outline planning permission for 100 residential dwellings in this site. Here is the location plan in front of you without the aerial view, just to show those 2 properties off the frontage there. And it's a large, wide open site within the settlement boundary of Durham. Here is the planning layout that's put before you today for committee approval. Obviously, members will recall this application that was due to be heard at Planning Committee in December, and it was subsequently deferred following the receipt of a letter from Leaves Prior on behalf of Durham Town Council. The contents of the letter has subsequently been considered, specifically with regards to open space, as well as their latest letter that was sent on Thursday last week, which was referred to in the supplementary report for members' knowledge, and it was available to view on our website since we've received it. Please note the proposal, as I've really set out, is for a reserve matters application, where only matters of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale can be considered, with access already being considered at outline application stage. It is only these reserve matters that may be considered by the council and members at this stage when determining this application. Whilst layout includes the layout of open space, this only concerns the way these spaces are orientated and situated, and not what the precise provision should be. This being the case, the detailed layout in the application plans and the officer report has considered the design, layout and orientation of open space only. The amount and provision of open space is clearly defined in the signed Section 106 agreement and subsequently varied deed of variation. The open space provision on the site consists of open space to the northeastern corner that members can see on the plan in front of you, and this includes the lagoon and the pump track. An area of open space is also proposed to the centre of the site and comprises a leap. In terms of layout and the design and the orientation of open space, it is considered that the proposed layout satisfies the open space requirements for children's play space on site, in accordance with the level of provision stipulated in the Section 106 agreement and the deed of variation, with reference to the previously adopted policy DC11 of the Breckland Core Strategy. This will deliver an over-provision of play space on site of 2,070 square metres, including 582 square metres of leap to be located in the centre of the public open space. On site, there is also the provision of a pump track adjacent to the lagoon in the northeast corner of the site. The pump track was previously requested by Durham Town Council to provide a recreational area for BMX users. The applicants have therefore included this in their proposals. In terms of the layout of the rest of the site, it has been arranged around the central open space area and a centralised single access from Westfield Road. On all sides, north, south, east and west of the central element of open space, buildings in the form of residential dwellings frame that central open space and will provide natural surveillance, resulting in a well-defined and usable open space to the benefit of the new development and the wider community. Some landscaping is shown to be provided within the open space, and this with the specification of the leap will be checked and approved via further details which are required to be submitted by the Section 106 and the conditions of the planning permission. To the northeastern corner is a large attenuation area marked on the submitted plan as lagoon, and an area for outdoor sports measuring 729 square metres identified as the pump track. This is also framed on its western and southern sides by residential dwellings to provide natural surveillance and frame the open space in a positive way, as well as providing additional interest in terms of the lagoon, providing walking routes and additional leisure area. To the north, the space will provide a transition to land to the north, and to the west, a buffer between the site and the adjacent development. The total area identified for public open space is considered to be 2,799 square metres. The open space, its uses, natural surveillance, layout and provision for future occupants is considered to be acceptable and suits the overall character of the area, and it makes provision in a positive way for future occupants and the surrounding area. Despite the positive layout of on-site open space, the development, through its amendment on the request of officers to meet the nationally prescribed house standards as required by policy HOW 10 of the Breckland Local Plan, has resulted in a shortfall of outdoor sport space on site of approximately 3,023 square metres when taking into consideration the requirements of the previously adopted policy DC11. The deficit will be met in the form of a commuted sum in accordance with Schedule 3 of the Section 106 as varied by the deed of variation. This consists of an off-site contribution plus a maintenance sum, the amount of which, as I've said before, is dealt with by the Section 106 agreement and deed of variation, and it is not for consideration or discussion at this reserved matters stage. Please note that policy HOW 10 requires that all new homes across all tenures meet the government's nationally prescribed space standards. Initially, the dwellings on the scheme submitted did not meet these space standards in accordance with policy HOW 10. The layout and design of dwellings were amended on the advice of officers, and now all the dwellings meet the prescribed space standards, which is a requirement of policy HOW 10. However, the result of this has been a reduction in the open space provision. Paragraph 2 of the NPPF and planning legislation requires planning permissions to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The current development plan includes the Breckland Local Plan and policy EMV04. However, open space requirements was a matter considered at outline stage under the policies at that time, namely policy DC11 of the core strategy. And the open space requirements were secured through a planning obligation in the usual manner. The council cannot revisit this now at this reserved matter stage. In any event, whilst the council notes the requirements of policy EMV04 in the context of the outline permission, the current proposals in terms of layout, design and orientation of on-site open space and the layout of dwellings are considered to be acceptable as previously set out. Any shortfall in open space will be provided for by the contribution required and defined by the Section 106 and deed of variation. The applicant's revised supporting statement has noticed that there has been input from the Town Council in the provision of outdoor sport on site, which there is where the idea for the pump track to be located in the northeastern corner of the development came from. There have been ongoing discussions with environmental health over the composition of the pump track to ensure that there's no adverse impacts by way of noise to nearby properties. The houses nearest the pump track have been orientated to provide surveillance over the pump track for additional security. There are not considered to be any other impacts on amenity in terms of proximity of proposed dwellings to existing residential, as well as proposed, and the provision of amenity space for new dwellings is considered acceptable. Therefore, residential amenity is considered to be protected in accordance with policy COM04 of the Breckland Local Plan. Access as previously set out was considered at outline application stage and therefore cannot be revisited at this stage. However, the Highways Authority have no objection to the proposal in layout and design terms. There are also no objections from statutory consultees in terms of the lead local flood authority, trees, affordable housing, ecology, contamination and environmental health. The layout and design of the dwellings is also considered acceptable, and it is considered to suit the wider character of the area. There's a range of house types and sizes. The housing mix is considered acceptable and the proposed materials are also considered acceptable in this regard. The landscaping as shown is considered also to be acceptable, and conditions require attention and further landscaping information to be submitted to ensure that landscaping is appropriate for the site. On this basis, officers consider that the layout, as shown in front of members, is completely acceptable and accords with the requirements of the reserved matters application for this application. Also, members, it's obviously been checked by our affordable housing team, our affordable housing colleagues who are happy with the layout and the pepper potting of the affordable housing in small groups around the application site, and those can be shown with blue dots in front of you on the presentation. I've included some examples of the house types for you for your consideration, and here you can see that the materials are entirely appropriate with the surrounding area and will create a new defining character of this area in their own right. And here it also shows you the mix and sizes of the house types proposed and the types of dwelling proposed for the application site going forward. Here we can see Westfield Road facing north with the footpath, which is the blue line plan outlined just to the right hand side of the plan for you. Photograph for you in front. Facing north with the school entrance on the opposite side of the road. Members are obviously reminded that access was considered at outline application stage and the details have already been determined as such. And Westfield Road looking south with the future entrance to the site, with the demolition of a dwelling facilitated to create access to that site, again, already considered and allowed at outline stage. And Westfield Road, again, backing onto the site. So members, officers have considered the application. They've considered they've improved the site by increasing the house types in this location. So they now meet the nationally prescribed space standards as required by policy HOW 10. And they've considered the reserve matters that are appropriate to consider at this time. And the development is considered acceptable and recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for the presentation. We have on our speaker list today, starting off with Tony Needham, please, who's the clerk to the Durham Town Council. Trying to find you. No? I won't see you, Tony. Yes, 3 minutes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Durham has a deficit of 34 hectares of outdoor playing space. The committee should refuse this application because it is not compliant with the original outline consent, or it should defer the application until the mistakes in the 106 agreement have been corrected. This is one of those very rare occasions, Mr. Chairman, where all parties are actually in agreement. The Planning Committee have said the development must comply with policy DC11. The Town Council want the development to comply with policy DC11. The planning officers in their report state that the application should comply with policy DC11. Even the applicant, in an email from July 2019, stated that they will comply with policy DC11. And I imagine that members of the public watching this would also want the development to comply with policy DC11. Everybody, therefore, wants the development to comply with policy DC11. Unfortunately, the application does not comply with policy DC11. It does not comply with DC11 because the 106 agreement has omitted 4 very specific and important paragraphs. These are paragraphs E3, E5, E14 and E15 of Appendix E of DC11. These are the paragraphs that require land values to be considered in any commuted sum calculation. An honest mistake has been made in the drafting of the 106 agreement. Unfortunately, the value of that mistake makes the community poorer in outdoor playing space to a value of around £220,000, but makes Persimmon shareholders wealthier by the same amount. The application can be made fully compliant by either providing all the outdoor playing space on site or including all of Appendix E of DC11 into the 106 agreement. All parties have confirmed in writing that they want the development to comply with policy DC11, including the head of land and planning at Persimmon Homes. So I can see no justifiable reason why correcting a mistake would be resisted. When any of us make a mistake, the honourable and right thing to do is to correct that mistake. Members of the committee, I urge you to defer the application and give Persimmon Homes the opportunity to be honourable and do the right thing. Give them time to reflect on their ethics and then correct the mistake in the 106 agreement. I would also urge you to be clear that you will only consider this again, either when all the outdoor playing space is provided on site or when the 106 agreement includes all the paragraphs from Appendix E. Remember, everybody, even the applicant, have stated in writing that they want the application to comply with policy DC11. In the interests of the children of Durham, please give all parties the opportunity to do the honourable thing and pursue all available avenues to correct the mistakes in the 106 agreement. Remember, the mistake is valued at around £220,000 worth of outdoor playing space, and Durham has a 34 hectare deficit in outdoor playing space. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to go straight over to Mike Horn, please, before we take our next speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to reiterate what is clearly set out in the officer's report in response to what Tony Needham has just said, and that is that the Section 106 agreement or any alleged deficiencies in it is not a matter for consideration at this committee. It is just not for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got Jessica Groom, please, who's the applicant. And also there's Kian Saidi, I hope I've said that right, who's the senior planner for questioning, if need be, by members. And Josh Hain, who's the assistant engineer, is also there for question. But it's over to you, please, Jessica. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank members of the Planning Committee for allowing me to present this scheme today on behalf of Persimmon Homes Anglia, who are a well-established house builder with a proven track record in the prompt delivery of much-needed market and affordable housing. The proposals in front of you today will deliver a significant number of high-quality new homes and will assist in meeting the housing needs of the district. Outline planning permission was granted in 2017 for up to 100 dwellings with access approved in detail. The principle of development on site is therefore established. This application seeks approval of the remaining reserve matters, namely appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, and will also deliver 25% affordable housing and open space in line with Section 106 requirements. Persimmon has worked tirelessly with the council to settle the most appropriate scheme of the highest design and offering. The original scheme was capable of including full on-site provision of open space in accordance with planning policy and terms of the Section 106 agreement as amended. The layout and house types have subsequently been amended to comply with the nationally described space standards. This was a compromise Persimmon were happy to make, even though the policy requirement for space standards was not required nor enforced at outline stage. This was preferred by the council's officers and as a consequence reduced the amount of land available for on-site public open space. It is also relevant to note that under the original Section 106 agreement, only 2,000 square metres of on-site public open space was required. Following discussions with the council, Persimmon agreed to amend the agreement to secure policy-compliant open space, also allowing for an off-site contribution to be paid in lieu of any deficiency. We are pleased to see that officers have taken the time to fully consider this issue and have concluded that the proposals make sufficient provision of open space in accordance with the signed Section 106 agreement. Throughout the application process, Persimmon have worked positively with the Town Council to try and meet its aspirations for the area. This is reflected in the current proposals, which include a BMX pump track as well as open space suitable for informal sports, which have been included at the Town Council's request to address local need. Through extensive consultation, we have reviewed all statutory consultee responses and worked to successfully address all comments and queries raised. We have also amended the scheme to take on board comments received via letters of representation, such as potential concerns regarding overlooking. The scheme offers a range of sustainable benefits for Durham, including off-site highway improvement works and significant financial contributions towards education and library facilities in the local area. In conclusion, this is a high-quality residential development which complies with the relevant policy and will also create a pleasant environment in which to live whilst helping to meet the need for new homes. As recommended by the Council's Planning Officer, we respectfully request members to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, I'm just trying to stop my stopwatch out, something's happened. Okay, we're ready. We've got Councillor Philip Morton, please. Can't see him. Oh yes, there you are.
Thank you,
3
Chairman.
minutes, please, Philip.
Yeah, I don't wish to go into too much detail, but it is important to establish what all parties agreed to. The outline planning permission approved in July 2017 had a planning statement that included 40% affordable housing, a commitment to policy DC 14 to provide 10% renewable energy, and confirmation that open space in accordance with DC 11 will be established at reserved matters. The first 106, dated October 2017, but not lodged until June 2019, stated a minimum open space of 2,000 square metres rather than the truer figure of 5,500. In May 2019, an amendment was approved by committee to reduce the affordable element to 25% on the basis of emerging policy. Arising from this, a second 106 was drawn up showing this 25%, but also included reference to open space being provided in accordance with DC 11 and a table setting out the calculation. This, however, was not complete and was replaced by an upgraded version in October 2020. However, this did not include the land acquisition element necessary for a meaningful contribution to providing outdoor playing space. The committee report seems to be suggesting that in order to comply with nationally prescribed space standards, HOU 10, that the open space needs to be reduced by around 3,000 square metres. This doesn't make sense. The new local plan enables the nationally prescribed space standard in HOU 10 and a greater amount of open space to be provided. It is not correct to say we have to choose between outdoor open space and indoor house space. We should have both. The policies demand it. I'm sure all parties, including the developers, wish to comply with policies DC 11, HOU 10, and the broader principles of MPPF and GN1 for sustainable development. With this in mind, I ask that this application be turned down and a provision for outdoor playing space be agreed that is in line with DC 11 or N04 in the latest local plan. If not, I feel the local community will have less confidence in the overall process to arrive at a fair conclusion.
Thank you, Philip. Over to you, please, Mike Horn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could please repeat that, as has been stated both in the officer's report and repeated again today by Rebecca Collins, that the issue of the provision of open space as opposed to open space insofar as it affects layout is not a matter for consideration by this committee today. This is a reserved matter application and matters to do with the provision of open space and the Section 106 agreement are not relevant. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks once again, Mike. Okay, it's open to questions from members. Could I also remind you that we've got the applicant and a planning, one of our planning assistants and an engineer here as well. Could I start with Councillor Wilkinson, and then I'll do Councillor Crane, Councillor Gilbert. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a matter of transparency. We have, as members, received direct correspondence from the East Durham Town Council clerk referring to correspondence we might not have seen in the officers' reports. Just thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Crane, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope I'm doing this right, because the reserve matters application is access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. So really the question I'd like to ask is what planning opportunities have been taken for wildlife? The ecology report in both December 2019 and August 2020 made recommendations that the spotted orchid colony, which will be destroyed by the new development, be translocated within the site. There should also be provision for swift and bird boxes, and that the vegetated boundaries be retained. Many of the birds on the heard or seen list within that report are on the orange or red alert. Boundaries between properties should allow for wildlife corridors for small mammals and especially the dwindling hedgehog numbers. And I just see if the applicant could give some confirmation of what is going to happen there, please.
There we go. That's one for you, Jessica.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So we had an updated ecology walkover on site. So we updated all of the ecology reports, which were submitted as part of the outline. I believe we're still taking forwards all of them. I think all of the provisions, which were in the mitigation strategies, which were mentioned in the report. So we'll be providing bird and bat boxes, I think we're also looking at providing a wildlife pond if feasible. We're also going to issue information leaflets to all residents as recommended by the ecologist, just to inform them of what's on site, just to increase the sort of information available to them. We're going to reinstate all boundaries where possible, where we breach them for easements. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that, Keon.
I think you've covered it off pretty much, Jess. I think it was mentioned about hedgehogs. So one of the conditions on the consent is for an ecological management plan, which sets out what mitigation is going to be implemented. But one part of that is going to be hedgehog wildlife-friendly boundary treatments and fencing. And all the other elements will be covered in that plan as well to then be implemented.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Crane?
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chairman. Can I just come back, because my first thing was about the spotted orchid colony, which is going to be destroyed. I know you haven't actually mentioned that, Jessica, in your response. What is going to happen with that colony, please?
Thank you. Jessica, please.
Yeah, sorry, I completely forgot to mention that. We have spoken to the ecologist and we're going to be translocating that. So part of it will be, I believe, around the lagoon, as recommended by the ecologist, and the other part of it will be in the northeast corner, in the same area, but in the upper POS, where we don't imagine too many people trampling, so it'll be away from all of the spaces of activity. So we are looking to translocate them, and we've been given optimum times to do so, although I do believe it can be done all year round. I think we've also had someone watching while we've been doing our archaeology work, so all of the archaeologists, the site investigation consultants are very aware that we need to protect those. So yeah, we've considered it the whole way through.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Gilbert and then Councillor Dyke and Councillor Clark. So you can put your hands down, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I would like to start by saying that the applicant has confirmed that this application is for up to 100 dwellings. Now, this has got a lot of history, this site, and I want to make sure I fully understand the sequence of events and get all my ducks in a row. It appears that the first application, did not comply with national space standards. Now, to have that from a national developer actually putting in an application which does not conform to the standards required, I think is unfortunate, should we say. So that was addressed and the space standards were met by building obviously larger houses. And that meant that there wasn't enough room for the open space. Another way of providing the site as it should be done is to actually reduce the number of houses, conform with the national space standards and conform with the requirements for the amount of open space. Surely this application could be done that way because the application was for up to 100 houses and not definitely for a full 100 houses. So I think on that basis, I'm finding it very difficult to support this application. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I was being very good there. I was waiting for the question, but that didn't actually come. But never mind. Sorry, I'll take Rebecca Collins first, please.
All I was going to say, members, is obviously you need to consider the application in front of you, not what your ideal application would be, and obviously reach a determination based on what is in front of you and its acceptability. And obviously you have our recommendation as officers that, you know, the development that in terms of the reserve matters is acceptable and the open space provision is acceptable in terms of the reserve matters, and that already set out in the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you for that. We've got Councillor Dygan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably going to upset one or two people by actually, well, asking a question. I know we can't change the 106 agreement because you've signed that and that's happened, but there seems to have been a severe lack of consultation with members on the 106 agreement, because at the previous application it was said, and that's the planning inquiry, that all open space would be provided on site. Now, perhaps that's now it's occurred that it can't be, but at no point were, I think, members actually told that this was occurring. And also, there seems to be a trade-off between DC 11 and How 10. And on my view, I'd rather have more open space rather than the upgraded houses, to be honest. I think the open space, because if the developer wants to build houses like Mr. Gilbert said, they could build less houses. But I think the main thing was seems to be a lack of telling members of what's been going. On the actual other bits, I couldn't tell you the calculations because I'm not a mathematician, but I just feel that members have been rather sort of left out of the loop slightly.
So there wasn't a question there either.
Well, no, I was asking why weren't members perhaps actually consulted, and perhaps this ought to have come, the 106 ought to have come back with this application rather than being signed off earlier.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Councillor. I'm going to go to Councillor Clark first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a few actual questions this time. Question for 2 or 3 for Rebecca to start off with. Just sort of basic information ones on 2 aspects. One is around the flood and water management team, page 18 and 19. I note the flood team aren't objecting to the reserve matters, but they do talk about further geotechnical investigation and so forth. They want to see agreements in place for alternative discharge locations, including Anglian Water. I may have not seen that in the additional report or in conditions. The other aspect is on page 20 on environmental health. As we know, this site does abut the sort of not just bungalows down Westfield Road, but also the, if you like, the industrial area on the estate there, or Rushes Green. And in terms of acoustic fencing, it says from the report from the environmental health officer, I've been unable to find these details have been submitted. Construction method statement submitted and details preventing dust pollution. It did not include noise provisions. So obviously there's the ongoing work when any development starts, but also, you know, the permanent noise provision. As he says, given the proximity of the site to existing residential premises, recommend the following conditions during the construction phase. But obviously there's going to be noise on a permanent basis. So it's really looking for assurance on those 2 issues, Rebecca. And then I've got a question for you, and then a potential question for either Mike Corn or the clerk. So if you want to come back to me first on those 2, if you can, Rebecca, thank you.
So the acoustic fencing is covered by the boundary treatment condition, which we've added as referenced in the report. And the flood risk, I believe, is conditioned on the outline. But if you want to ask your second question, I'll look it up for you.
Okay. Yeah, the other question is around the on the flood and water management team. They ask for further consultation if the application's reviewed. They look as if they want more information to establish there's an acceptable drainage strategy. They say when condition 8 is discharged, and to demonstrate that the SUDS hierarchy has been followed, etc. That's the 3rd paragraph, top of page, on page 19 of your report. That's particularly important in that area, given the Durham stream and all this, the associated water runoff, surface water management, which is an issue, you know, as I know, and obviously Councillor Dygan. So obviously the principle's been established in development, so that I couldn't see it in the referred to in the conditions. It's implicit in what they've said, but I didn't see that specified the conditions. So
yeah. So what the lead local flood authority is saying is the applicant at this stage hasn't submitted sufficient information to discharge condition 8 of the outline permission, but the outline planning permission doesn't require those details to be submitted as part of the reserved matters. The lead local flood authority are just giving us the heads up that when condition 8, or the applicant's the heads up, that when they discharge condition 8, they will need to do those works as well for them to be acceptable in that regard. But that is a requirement on the outline permission. for those information to be submitted. So it's the lead local flood authority giving the applicants the heads up that that information will be required.
Okay, I was just making sure that wasn't just going to slip through the net. I'm sure it won't.
Harry, you might want to ask them whether it's on their radar.
I will. I'll come back to that, the applicant, in a minute. One more question for you and then to the clerk. You've mentioned in your conclusion on page 15 in terms of open space. Am I right in thinking that normally when we have a section 106, we have a commuted sum, normally the 106 reflects a variety of off-site contributions. There might be health, education, additional fire hydrant, etc. Things are specified. There are two aspects, I think, you're referring to what the town clerk for Durham referred to. One is there's the shortage of space in Durham per se. That's, if you like, a separate issue. In terms of this particular site, obviously the logic for me, I'm just trying to understand some of the process here, because it's very unusual for any, shall we say, controversy about 106 to come back, as it were, to committee like this. I can't recall it in my sort of 6-7 years on the committee. Is that obviously you normally want to have everything perfect on the site in terms of space for the houses, everything to be compliant. And obviously the key thing is going to be the amenity for future occupants. So where, for example, you've said here, it's the officer's view, despite there being under provision of open space and site development, that's outweighed by provision of policy compliant types. So an off-site contribution in accordance with the section 106 will be secured to really get any shortfall. So therefore, it would seem to me that any disagreement, although we're not allowed to discuss it, so I hope Mr. Horn doesn't cut me off, is presumably there's a difference between the shortfall that's being agreed by officers and or the applicant and the shortfall that Durham Town Council appears to be calculating. If we accept that we can't actually have our cake and eat it, so we can't have the 100 houses and all the right space, because something would have to give. So the difference seems to be, and I'm not, if it's inadvisable to comment, fine, but it seems to be that whilst there may be the amount there isn't possibly the acquisition values. I don't know, because when we make our decisions at the committee, we don't normally hear any more about this. We say, right, there's good provision, etc., etc. We then look at the layout and design and scale, which may determine the amount of space. Sometimes we try to, put things around a bit in this negotiation where you put things, and there's only a finite amount of space here. So what you've said here is it unreasonable of the council to require any further open space at this time through reserved matters. It may or may not be a question whether any further discussions on open space do take place, not within the reserved matters, following the information that's available. I mean, obviously the members of the committee are in the hands of the officer. If I can go to the applicant now, perhaps ask the applicant about the information that you suggested around the filtration and drainage, to see if you've got any comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Not too many comments. We have pulled all of this information together. So what we normally do is it's conditioned as it has been. We work in the background. So we've got the full details of the surface water drainage, full details of the foul drainage. I don't know if Josh wants to add anything, but these have actually already been submitted. So obviously, provided we get consent, they will then be sent to the relevant statutory consultees. So we do have all of this information, and we're satisfied that we have a drainage scheme that's acceptable. Josh, did you have anything to add?
Not really. You've covered most off. I think in regards to the drainage strategy, it's a very one-way street. I think you might be familiar with the type of soil situated in Durham. It's very cohesive. So the infiltration route of a drainage strategy isn't really feasible, which I know the LLFA did comment on. As well, the required further SI testing we have carried out, which was BRE 365 soakage testing, which came back with poor permeability results. So the strategy that we have put forward to planning under condition 8 should be satisfactory in that regard.
Just one quick question. Thank you very much for that. So just one quick question to the town clerk, Durham. Whilst we may not be to do anything at reserved matters, as Rebecca's indicated, it's also Mike Horn. I'm rather puzzled as to, normally, as I said, we don't get involved with the 106s. We can make our agreement, we have outline permission, there's no problem with that. We then come to reserved matters of layout. I just wondered if you could comment, if the clerk could comment on, enlighten me as to how this sort of issue has actually arisen in the first place. What made you think that there was an issue in terms of the shortfall, not in terms of the shortfall.
Sorry, Councillor, I don't see the need for a reply to that. Mr. Horn, do you wish to add anything?
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing to add over and above what you've just said. I don't think it is appropriate for this to be aired now.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Attawell and then Councillor Chapman-Allen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to direct my questions to the council solicitor, if I may. So first one, Mike. This is a reserved matters application, and we're told that we can consider layout. Can you tell me what the definition of layout is in terms of considering an application at reserved matters?
If I could ask Becky to answer that one, that's quite a planning question that it's probably better for plans.
Can you give me a minute to look it up and then I'll read it out for you verbatim, Councillor Attawell?
Okay, well, yeah, I'd like to know the answer.
Is there a more direct question, please?
Well, I need that answer to that one first, please, Chairman. I think that's quite relevant. So I'd like to know the answer, hence why I was asking for a legal definition of it. So apologies to Mike if I've directed the question to the wrong person.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll hold you at the moment. I'll come back to you. Can I take Councillor Chapman-Allen's question, please?
Hello, Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Chairman, thank you. I think some of us tend to be avoiding the fact that the issue of open space is not up for consideration. But I just would like to ask Rebecca about the increase in house size. I understand is in accordance with HOU 10 that houses constructed to minimum size. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. So the difference between policies is HOU 10 is a must policy. So houses must be constructed in accordance with the nationally prescribed space standards. And that's why officers have taken that forward and ensured that all houses do meet those space standards.
Thank you. And Chairman, I also read in the report the applicants are actually over providing on open space, together with a £60,000 contribution to Durham Town Council to spend where they want, together with a pump track which they've requested. I'd like to ask the clerk if he's happy with that £60,000 contribution and the fact that the pump track is being seriously looked into with the Environment Department to see whether it can be put in place. Are you happy?
There we go, Mr. Thank you. Mr. Needham, there we go. That's a direct question to you.
Thank you. Yes. I think going back to when this was being discussed with myself and Persimmons Homes, and we had a very constructive discussion about the layout and what would be provided. I think we only parted company when it became apparent that they couldn't provide all the quantum of outdoor playing space on the development site as
that's
the
not
outline
my
application.
question.
No.
Sorry, am I happy with that? No, because it doesn't include the land acquisition values.
So you're not happy with £60,000 to spend where you want, providing and the provision of a pump track. Okay, Chairman, thank you very much. That's answered my question.
Thank you. Rebecca, do we have a response to Councillor Atwell, please?
Yeah, so layout includes buildings, routes and open spaces within the development and the way they're laid out in relation to buildings and spaces outside the development. So it's buildings, routes and open spaces and the way they are laid out. That's the important aspect of the definition of layout with regards to reserved matters.
Are you happy with that response, Councillor Atwell?
No, I'm not actually, Chairman, and that's why I think I probably need a bit more of a legal definition here. If we're talking about layout of the open space, surely that means layout in terms of policy compliance, does it not?
Yes, in terms of layout, but not in terms of the amount of provision. So anything to do with open space that deals with its orientation, the way it is laid out, where it is, what it looks like is absolutely fine. But to deal with matters or to seek to deal with matters that have already been dealt with in the outline permission is not possible at this reserved matters.
Okay, thank you. Right, next question then. This is a fairly easy question. Is this application that we have before us policy compliant with DC 11 in terms of layout provision on the site? That's a straight question. I think Mike can answer that one. Is it?
Rebecca, please. Thank you.
So what you're looking at in terms of the layout and the reserved matters is the context of the current policy, which would be EMV04. And I've gone to great length during the presentation to explain that, yes, the layout in terms of the reserved matters is policy compliant. It's the amount that isn't policy compliant with DC 11, which is an outline matter that's already been considered for your members. So today you're considering the reserved matters, and the reserved matters is the layout, which includes the open space, the design of the buildings, is that policy compliant and appropriate? And as officers, we're telling you, yes, it is appropriate in terms of layout, what you can consider under the reserved matters.
Forgive me, but you've just explained that this is not policy compliant with DC 11. Now, at the outline stage, in the report that I think officers did for the outline application, it stated public open space should be provided on site in line with policy DC 11. So I'll ask the question, is the open space on this site compliant with policy DC 11? Because if it isn't, it's not complying with what was requested at the outline stage.
Can I just
Rebecca, please.
Can I just clarify that that is not the amount of open space is not a consideration for you at reserved matters stage. It is not a consideration for you now, members, the amount of open space that was determined at outlined application stage. What you're looking at is where it is on the site, how it relates to the surrounding dwellings, what landscaping there is, what outlook is there, what natural surveillance there is, not the amount of open space. That's not a consideration for you at this stage with this application. You could I just consider the application in front of you.
Forgive me, but could I just clarify? I've skirted around the section 106 business deliberately because Mike Horn asked us this, but I think it was Jessica Groom who said earlier on that this application is in accordance with the signed section 106 agreement. Now, there's a specific amount of land that's been put into that original section 106 agreement, but does that mean that that was policy compliant? If there was an error in the 106, what I'm trying to establish is we've got a reserved matters application that clearly said at outline stage that it needed to be compliant with open space provision on site in accordance with DC 11. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of, if this isn't compliant with policy DC 11, why not? Or are we trying to skirt around the issue and try and make something fit what's currently in the Section 106 agreement, because the Section 106 agreement to me is a side issue. If there's a problem with the legal agreement, and personally, I've looked at all the legal papers that we've been sent, I think there is. But if that is for the council solicitors and the applicant to determine, probably in consultation with the town council. And I'm looking at a reserved matters application. I'm trying to establish, is this compliant with what this planning committee determined back in 2017? Was the requirement for the site to have open space provision in accordance with DC11? If not, something's gone wrong in between then and now. I'm trying to establish that on purely planning terms.
Okay, thank you very much. Rebecca, if you'd like to answer that, please.
Yeah, so don't forget that DC11 and now your policy EM4 allows for open space provision both on site and off site.
Okay.
And your Section 106 agreement also allows for open space provision on site and a maintenance contribution and off site open space.
Okay.
The difference between this is it's tied it down to DC11. So what the application has done in the translation to the reserve matters, it's providing a certain amount of open space on site in accordance with DC11, and then off-site provision in accordance with the Section 106 agreement, and a contribution in lieu of that on-site provision.
Okay, can I come back there, Chairman?
Just one sec. Rebecca, finish off, please.
Oh, sorry. You know, therefore, it is DC11 policy compliant in terms of amount, and we've translated that amount onto the reserve matters application, and we're then defined that amount. Is the layout that is shown on site appropriate or not in accordance with your current policy, which is EMV04? And we as officers have assessed that the current layout is acceptable in open space provision.
Thank you. Councillor Attwell, I'll allow you to return.
Okay. Policy DC11. I'm going to just read this short extract because I'd like somebody to confirm that we are complying with this. You've just said that there's off-site provision. And if the answer to this is yes, then, you know, I'm reasonably happy. But let me read it. The level of contribution will be calculated in accordance with the criteria set out in Appendix E, Open Space Contributions. Paragraph E5 of Appendix E states, in deriving an open space contribution, there are 4 constituent parts: children's play provision, outdoor sports provision, maintenance, and here's importantly, land acquisition, which I think is where the issue is that Durham Town Council have. Have we got a situation at the moment where we've got Section 106 agreement? If you're saying it has to be off-site to comply with DC11, to comply with what was required in the outline permission, have we taken account of, in the Section 106 agreement, all of those items, and in particular land acquisition, as laid out in paragraph E5, Appendix E of Policy DC11?
Thank you, Mr. Horn.
Thank you, Chairman. This is not relevant to this application today, which is a reserved matters application. And we should not be considering this matter here.
Okay, thank you. There we go. Any further questions from members at all? No. Okay. I apologise to Jessica Groom and Kian Saidi because we are debating with members and officers. You are to respond when asked questions. So I apologise for you sitting there with your hands up and me ignoring you, but I did see you, but I did ignore you. Thank you. Okay, now members, can I take a show of hands that you've understood what has been put before you and that you've followed the debate clearly? Could you all show your hands, because we'll take the vote after that, please. Councillor Digan, have you followed it? Yes. Okay, that's all members. Councillor Attrell, did you put your hand up? You followed it? Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes,
thank you. Okay, thank you. So with that, the application for Westfield Road 3PL 2019-1526, a reserve matters application, your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Julie, could you take the call for the recommendation of approval, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson?
For.
Councillor Atterwill?
Against.
Councillor Bowes. Sorry, Councillor Bowes, I didn't hear.
Sorry, my sound isn't very good at the moment. I said 4.
4. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Brame.
4.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen.
4.
Councillor Clark.
I'm abstaining.
Councillor Crane.
4.
Councillor Dygan.
Against.
Councillor Gilbert.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
4.
And Councillor Kybird.
4.
Chairman, that's 7 for approval, 3 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. This item is approved. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance, speakers, and the town clerk. Thank you. If we can clear members out, and then we can go on to our next item at Elsing. And we've got Robert Shaw, the applicant, to join us. This item is approved. Thank you. Okay, members. I'm not sure who was. Someone's voice came in there. Councillor Crane.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would just like to state that I have a personal and prejudicial interest in this matter, and I will accordingly not take part in it and leave the meeting, please.
Okay, can we shift Councillor Crane to the waiting room, please? Thank you. Okay, members, we're on to Elsing now. Application number 3PL 2020-1134F. And I think this is yours, Rebecca, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're the Three Bridges Solar Farm, land south of Elsing Road. The application in front of you is for 35 hectares of solar farm on the area marked in red on the aerial photography in front of you. You can see around it, it's located off Heath Road. Heath Road is to the south of the application site. To the west of the application site lies Ling, and to the northeast is Elsing. This is 35 hectares of solar farm. Here is the relationship to the settlement boundary, which I'll come back to. So it's 35 hectares, it's 15 megawatts of power, and it has the ability to power 6,781 homes. And what is put before you today is a 40-year planning permission with an available 2 years for decommissioning at the end of that. So members will note from the planning application the recommendation for a 42-year planning permission. Members will also note from the officer report that it was a full planning application. No environmental impact assessment was required with the planning application. The planning application was screened prior to submission of application for an environmental impact assessment, but it was believed that there wouldn't be significant environmental effects from the development, and therefore no environmental impact assessment was required. Subsequently, we've obviously had full details of the solar farm, which have been assessed in front of you. And given that there's no objection from statutory consultees and officers have rescreened the development for environmental impact, it's considered it is not necessary in this instance, and there won't be significant environmental effects. Obviously, from the officer report, members will also note Elsing Parish Council's comments that they don't object to the application, but they have raised and reiterated some of the concerns of neighbouring properties about there not being an environmental impact assessment. The proximity of the panels to dwellings and the location plan in front of you shows some of that proximity to those residential dwellings in the surrounding area. The potential impact on traffic and wildlife and health impacts being the material planning considerations that they raise. Also, the Parish Council have noted within their response that there is to be a community benefit scheme related directly from the solar farm given to Elsing Parish Council. The details of that are in their comments in the report. It is important to members to note that this is not part of the planning permission and not needed to make the direct development acceptable, and therefore not part of your deliberations today. Members will also note from the supplementary report and the officer recommendation that there is one outstanding objection from statutory consultees from Northamptonshire County Council Public Rights of Way team. However, this objection was related to the original scheme. The applicant submitted further information before Christmas, and despite substantial chasing from the applicants and officers, we had had no response from the Public Rights of Way team with regards to the amended scheme with regards to public rights of way. Therefore, I recommend that we update the recommendation in the officers committee report to that in the supplementary to suggest that if we have had no response from Northamptonshire Public Rights of Way team within 21 days of the date of this committee, in the event members think this is an acceptable scheme and approve it, then we're able to issue an approval with the condition scheme as the applicant's proposing. And I've got some images to show you that later. Also, members will note from the officer report that we haven't had a response from Ling Parish Council, and therefore I suggest we use those 21 days to further get an updated response from them with regards to the application. As set out in the officer report, there are 24 letters of objection, and I've set out previously their concerns, which are material planning considerations. Please note the principle of having a solar farm in this location is supported by your local plan policy EMV 10 in principle, and also the MPPF supports the principle of renewable energy. Also, your local plan supports diversification of agriculture by EMV 06, and the MPPF supports this principle, which is also set out in the officer report. So here is the site layout showing you roughly how the site will be utilised for an array of primarily solar panels, but there is accompanying equipment to that, which is all listed out into the officer report, including the scales of development. Members will note from the officer report that all the panels and associated equipment largely lie below 3 metres in height, and therefore it is a relatively low-lying development. Here are the elevation plans of the solar panels. Also, members will note from the officer report that some of the solar panels have been reduced in height to ensure that their effects on the local population aren't demonstrable, and also that they've been raised 0.8 metres off the ground to allow continued agriculture in the form of grazing underneath the panels, which is a benefit in terms of farm diversification, because the farmer has pointed out areas of the farm which he's unable to farm at this time. Here's the proposed substation elevation. It should be noted that this goes up to a maximum of 3.5 metres. So the maximum structure is 3.5 metres within the application site. And the battery energy storage and inverter plan, these are all listed in your officer report as being accompanying infrastructure which was required across the site. And the access track elevation plan for in between the arrays of solar farms. Here, when I talk about the public rights of way, there was notice that there's some concern. I've got some images later to show you the images of the solar panel. It will be visible from parts of the public right of way as it stands. There is proposed some screening and landscaping adjacent that to assist with that, but the applicants have noted that there is an impact, and they propose a further permissive path to the south of the proposed panels to link up with the existing footpath to give better circulation routes around the application site. And as you can see in green there in front of you, the line of the proposed permissive path, and in aerial for you as well. The applicants have obviously undertaken a landscape and visual assessment of the area, which shows limited impact on the surrounding area following the establishment of the proposed planting, which is extensive and is conditioned as part, or proposed to be conditioned as part of the application if acceptable. Like I've already said, they're relatively low-lying structures, and landscaping will ensure that development is well contained visually with moderate change to the wider landscape. So as you can see, it's currently open agricultural land. There is a fair bit of heavy landscaping to some parts of the boundaries of the site. The applicants propose within their application to fill any gaps within the boundary treatment, boundary hedging to ensure that views to the solar panels are limited. And they expect within a very limited amount of time, using established and mature planting, which is required by the condition, that these gaps will be filled and limited views will be available from the exteriors of the application site without entering the application site. So as you can see, it's large agricultural land as set out in the officer report. Some of it is currently used for farming, some is unable to be used for farming at this time, and it therefore represents an excellent opportunity for diversification. Within the landscape and visual assessment, it includes some viewpoints of the proposals. Here we can see the bridleway on the eastern boundary and the current viewpoint into the application site on the top there for you from construction, and then within a limited period the viewpoint when the landscaping has established. And again, members probably can't see in the distance, but this is the one of the neighbouring properties views distance the application site, and you can just see in the bottom curve there the panels hopefully, and then the landscaping established to limit views. And finally, the Field North Heath Road viewpoint, again, it's the panels there in the distance in between trees that you can see, and then the landscaping establishing to block those. In terms of amenity, this scheme has been fully assessed by our environmental health team. They've recommended conditions to condition the noise impact assessment that's been submitted with the application and the glint and glare assessment. However, it's largely noted that any noise impact or disturbance impact will occur during the construction period and ultimately the decommissioning period after the 40-year period. With regards to disrupting local people, it's noted that the construction period is only expected to take 13 to 20 weeks. And also we've conditioned a construction management plan, which includes hour of operation, dust provision, and also the use in terms of the local highway network and routing, which has been agreed and acceptable by the Highways Authority. And the Highways Authority have noted that the highways impacts will be negligible. I'll put my teeth back in. There's no lighting proposed on the application site, and there's a condition to ensure that would happen to prevent any disturbance to local wildlife or local people. And the development itself is non-toxic, and there's not expected to be any contamination from it. And again, that has been checked and approved with our environmental health department. Following updates to the application and further information, there's no concerns in terms of ecology, and Natural England and our ecologists don't object to the scheme. The site lies in flood zone 1, and there's no risk to flooding expected from this development, and no objection from the LLFA or the Environment Agency, and it is considered acceptable in all other regards. And given that the principle for renewable energy is strongly established within your local policy and the PPF, officers have recommended this one for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. You did mention at the beginning that you'd had no response from Ling Parish Council. Are they neighbouring? Is that all? Just a neighbouring?
Yeah, it does actually partly abut the boundary with them, so I'm quite concerned that we haven't had any response for them. And given that we're allowing 21 days for public rights away in the event the application was approved, sorry, Mike, then I think it would be reasonable to try and engage with them again. Sorry, Mike.
Okay, Mike, please. Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to correct for the record an obvious slip of the tongue, the county public right of way, obviously Norfolk, not Northamptonshire. It's obvious, but I felt it ought to be corrected for the tape.
Apologies.
Yeah, I got that.
Obviously, it is Norfolk. Obviously.
Good. I thought that was War of the Roses or something, where we were taking over more land than we actually needed. Okay, thanks. We've got Robert Shaw, please, who's the applicant. You have 3 minutes to speak, sir.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, Rebecca. So both the UK and Breckland have declared climate emergencies. And the renewable energy generated by this development will be a key part of tackling this while powering well over 6,000 homes and businesses per year. This power can be stored in the batteries, which will make it useful both day and night. The community will also benefit from the considerable biodiversity enhancements, the new hedges, the new trees, and the new footpath link connecting, as Rebecca says, the community to the Wensum Way, and which responds directly to those concerns that have been raised by the Public Rights of Way officer. PACE will also make a financial contribution directly to the parish and install solar panels on their community hall roof. The biodiversity measures that we're proposing have resulted in a net biodiversity gain of 240% and an over 94% increase in the amount of hedgerow compared with the existing site. The site occupies a small proportion of the overall landholding. It's currently low yielding, and actually quite a lot of the site is currently used for managing and shooting of game. So the project will allow an agricultural use by allowing sheep to safely graze under and around the solar panels. The site, as Rebecca has shown, is well screened from existing homes, and any noise generating equipment has been positioned well away from those homes. Once operational, there will be virtually no traffic generated by the scheme, and a management plan has been conditioned to minimise traffic disruption during the short construction period. And you can see the access route on the screen there. So PACE has had considerable engagement with the parish, particularly Elsing, and Elsing has noted some concerns which we've addressed, but is also supporting the scheme. So through this engagement, we've addressed the majority of those concerns, including additional tree protection measures, new hedgerows, further ecological enhancements, and the creation of that new footpath that I described. So in summary, the scheme makes a significant contribution to addressing Breckland's climate emergency. It will supply homes with clean, renewable energy day and night without the need for any subsidies. It's also been carefully designed to ensure minimal impact on the nearby community. We've engaged constructively with Elsing Parish, which has led to their support. And we've had extensive discussions with officers to overcome their outstanding concerns. So the planning conditions afford the council suitable control over the development, including the means to secure considerable landscape and biodiversity enhancements that I've described. So we thank officers for their recommendation and members for allowing us to present, and we hope that you can support this important scheme.
Sorry, I think I was a bit slow with the photos.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. It's open to questions from members. I've got Councillor Kybird, please, and then Councillor Chapman-Allen, Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chairman. A question for the applicant. It's not clear from the presentation how this solar farm will be connected to the national grid. Is that via existing cable routes, or does it require new connections? And secondly, you refer to on-site infrastructure. Will that include electric vehicle charging points? Thank you.
Mr. Shaw, you've muted yourself. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond now, Chair?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you for those questions. So let me take those in turn. So you're absolutely right. Neither Rebecca or myself have mentioned the grid connection. That will be to the existing network. It will be within the site itself. So there won't be any off-site grid connection measures along roads or fields. In terms of the electric vehicle charging, so I would say this isn't really a suitable location for a public charging point. So forgive me if I'm interpreting your question here to mean for site visits, vehicles and the likes. If that's the case, I think I would reiterate that there are very, very few, once operational, very few vehicles accessing the site. It really is a sort of white van turning up a handful of times a year. So I think the value of an electric vehicle charging point on the site is probably limited. But I would further say, in terms of practicality, the site here will generate at high voltage, so 33,000 volts. That would need to be transformed by its own transformer, so a new piece of equipment down to the 230 volts that wouldn't be needed for an electric vehicle. So I don't think, firstly, it's necessary or it would be practical. That said, with the side community payment, we'd be happy to talk with Elsing about the possibility of using some of that to install a public charger, perhaps somewhere in the village, if that helps.
Yes, thank you. Yes, certainly something of benefit to the community along those lines, perhaps at the village hall itself, would be good.
Yep, I think there's a good PR exercise there for you, Mr. Shaw. Okay, we've got Councillor Chapman-Allen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As a question for Rebecca to begin with, I don't know if she's able to answer it. The fact that power provision is going to be changing enormously in the coming years, I'm curious to know, if it's granted for 40 years, if other power provisions come along in the future, do they have to decommission it early? And where is the money for decommissioning stored, held, given that 40 years is a very long way away, Rebecca?
Yeah, agreed. So they wouldn't have to decommission on the basis of improvements to renewable energy generation, but they would have to decommission early in the event it became obsolete or unnecessary. So it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. So in theory, if technology advances at such a rate where this isn't, I was going to say viable, but that's not probably the right word, then there is conditions within the permission to require them to decommission early. And that is on the basis that it lies stagnant without generating power for 3 months or more. And they're required to submit a decommissioning strategy within certain months of that and decommission. In terms of the money, there's no requirement in the permission. There's no Section 106 to hold monies for decommissioning. Obviously in a 40-year period, I appreciate your concerns, but there is conditions that would go with the land. So ultimately it would be for the landowners, us to enforce the conditions upon the landowner for decommissioning, if that's a requirement. I'm not sure if Rob's allowed to come in and add any more, because obviously he's got a bit more experience of decommissioning elsewhere than I have.
I'd like to add to that, Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So this sort of question is quite common. The last thing anybody wants is a field full of obsolete equipment that's just been left. So there is a standard here, agreements with the landowner to put a bond in place that will require the site to be decommissioned and effectively for it to be restored to the state it's in today. So that gets capitalized in year 15. So it is there if for any reason in that sort of medium to long term there was any need to decommission it in advance. In that meantime, there is sufficient certainty in the market to be confident that wouldn't be an issue. So if that eventuality transpired, there is that decommissioning bond in place. That's a matter between the landowner and ourselves as developer, rather than something that is done through the planning application.
Chairman, could I ask Mr. Shaw another question then, please?
Yes, please.
Mr. Shaw, there's a solar farm in the south of Breckland where the hedgerow scheme and the shielding fence isn't looked after adequately by of the applicant of that solar farm. So in your case, if that was the same in this locality, who would the parish council or the local people come to if they were unhappy about the way it was being kept?
So again, these sort of questions are important, I think, and not one that we haven't given consideration to. So let me just start by saying that Pace, perhaps unlike many solar developers, it is a developer and an operator of solar farms. So we are here for the long term in a way that often isn't the case. We have an agreement with the landowner, and who will potentially be responsible for the upkeep of and maintenance of those of the landscaping and those mitigation measures around it. We would also have relationships with operation and maintenance companies for the solar panels themselves. So, and this is also, I should add, an issue that was a query raised by Elsing Parish. So we are, as part of the sort of side discussions that we're having with them, discussing some potential engagement from them as well. So that there are matters to be determined exactly how the mechanics of these things will work, but please be assured that there will be measures in place, and there will be the ability for officers, yourselves, the parish, to pick up the phone and say, this is falling between the cracks, that something needs to happen here. So there will be that communication.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Shaw.
Mr. Shaw. Rebecca, please.
Sorry, I've heard all about grazing sheep under solar panels. I've yet to see it actually take place in Breckland. So if you manage it, Mr. Shaw, you'll be first.
Oh, well, you never know. Rebecca, you want to come with a question, please?
Yeah, not about sheep. I just was going to say, councillors, in that that's a really good point, and it would be really appropriate to add a condition about management and maintenance of the fencing and the hedgerow landscaping, and it would be more than appropriate to do that if members wanted to do it. It's a really good point.
Good. And as far as decommissioning is concerned, I'm just wondering whether you're putting yourself forward to oversee that, Councillor Chapman-Allen? Put it in your 2064 diary.
Well, Chairman, you know how I feel about good agricultural land being used for solar farms, but I take on board what you say.
Good. I've got someone else. Councillor Bowes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to be clear, regarding the public right of way, is the further footpath that the applicants propose in line with what the County Council suggests in mitigation?
Chairman, would it be okay if Robert could come in, because yeah, it is in line with what they suggested in their earlier comments, but we haven't had follow-up comments in writing from them as officers, but I believe that Robert has had conversations with them.
Over to you, Mr. Shaw, again.
No problem. Thank you, Rebecca. So yes, so the sort of flavour of that holding objection from the county was that they were looking for mitigation for the temporary harm to that bridleway down the eastern side. So temporary while the new hedgerows grew up. So really, we're talking sort of 5 to 10 years. One of the suggestions they made was to create a permissive path connecting this through to the Wensum Way, which is exactly what we've provided. So basically, it goes from that eastern bridleway, goes along the southern boundary of the solar farm along Heath Road, crosses the road then at the point at which the existing public footpath connects. So it's creating a new short link, which means that walkers won't have to walk along Heath Road to get to the Wensum Way.
Okay, any further questions from members, please? Councillor Attawell and then Councillor Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question for Mr. Shaw, if I can. On Saturday, I went and visited the site, had a drive all the way around it a couple of times. And I noticed in the report that you're going to install 5-metre wide deer corridors around the site. Is there any evidence that they actually work? Have they been used elsewhere, and has there been any survey work done on the deer population locally? Do they use that field much? I know there's been much done about bat surveys and badgers, etc. But I couldn't see any information in your submission regarding the deer population. Just wondered if there'd been any work done on that. I was most intrigued by this this deer corridor, and actually, will they use it?
Mr. Shaw.
So no, we haven't done surveys on this, not being a protected species. This actually came from Elsing Parish and some of the community, and it was their concern that the solar farm didn't become a barrier to wildlife. Badgers being one of those, which we've addressed through further survey and badger gate, and the other was potential for deer. So really, it was more about an eventuality that may or may not happen. So should larger wildlife want to go around it, they're not prevented. So it's not not being a protected species. It's not something that we would survey for, but it's there as a measure should a deer turn up, I think.
Thank you. I think the issue may be if we didn't have a deer corridor, whether they're going to use it or not is down to them. Councillor Martin, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. If I could just give a question to Mr. Shaw. We've got 35 hectares of a big solar farm. Can you give any idea of the construction period would take, the length of time?
Of course. So we these things can be constructed incredibly quickly. We've allowed up to 5 months. So we've typically said sort of 3 to 5 months is that construction period. They can be done much quicker, and they certainly used to be when we were up against deadlines for subsidies. That's not the case anymore. So I would say somewhere between 3 and 5 months.
Terrific. Thanks very much. Okay, no further questions from, Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't hold up. It's just a matter of the deer thing. We've had a solar farm just on the edge of Narborough in Narford, and that was asked. The question was asked by the Narford Hall residents because there was a track going through to feeding grounds for the deer, and they actually do go through between the panels, and they do graze in off that grass as well. So they are quite intelligent, and they will be all right.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, can I have a show of hands, please, from members that you've heard and understood the presentation, please? Hands. Roy, yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay, thanks, members. Thank you. So with regards to the solar farm application at Elsing, application number 3PL 2020-1134F, your officer's recommendation is one of approval. So Julie, could I hand over you to take the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson?
4.
Councillor Atterwill?
4.
Councillor Bowes? Sorry, Councillor Bowes, I didn't hear you.
4.
4, thank you. Councillor Brame?
4.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Dygan?
4.
Councillor Gilbert?
4.
Councillor Martin?
4.
And Councillor Kybird?
4.
Thank you, Chairman. That is unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. So this item is approved. Okay, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Shaw. We made you work for that one.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Okay, by the way, just Rebecca, you will be adding the maintenance to the that you mentioned. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That is unanimous.
Thank you. And we now go over to Harling, application 3PL 2020-1201. We should have Steve Contes, who's an objector. Thomas Wheatley, who's the agent, oh yeah, down the bottom there, and Councillor William Nunn, who's the ward rep for that area. Thank you very much. So this one is Naomi Minto's.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, there you are. Gotcha.
I'm here.
Far
I'll
away.
just share my screen. Just bear with me.
Thank you.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Lovely. So the application seeks full planning permission for the erection of one detached 2-storey 3-bedroom dwelling with an integral single garage with storage space overhead, a detached triple carport with storage space overhead, on-site parking provision and vehicle turning and amenity space, sited partly on garden land and partly on agricultural land to the north of Tom's Meadow, Fen Lane and East Harling. Here's a picture of the site and the wider context. So the application site is located, as I just said, on part agricultural land and part garden land used in association with the host dwelling, Tom's Meadow. It is outside of the defined settlement boundary for Harling. There is a public right-of-way which runs the length of Fen Lane. I'll just run through the slides with you. So the site in relation to the settlement boundary there, you can see with the blue arrow. And the location plan and the proposed site plan is the part site plan. And the proposed dwelling elevations and the proposed floor plans and the proposed elevations and floor plans for the garage. And this is the proposed street scene. And you can see a faint dotted line in the middle, which is Fen Cottage, which is on the opposite side of Fen Lane. That's a replacement dwelling. So the site photos, this is looking north along Fen Lane and the adjacent cottage, and looking south along Fen Lane towards the main public highway. This is looking southwest across the site, and you can just see Tom's Meadow, the dwelling there. And looking west across this site towards the fields. This is the adjacent cottage. It's not a listed building, but it is a historical period property. This is Fen Cottage opposite the site. This was granted planning permission for a replacement dwelling and is currently under construction. And back to the proposed site plan. In terms of the consultations, Harling Parish Council have objected to the development on the basis that it is overdevelopment. In addition, they consider that the lane will have a detrimental impact on the character and outlook of the lane, along with increased noise for residents already living on Fen Lane, with extra traffic movements, especially during construction of any new dwellings. There's also been an objection from Norfolk County Council Highways. They consider that inadequate visibility displays are provided at the junction of the access with the county highway, and this would cause danger and inconvenience to users of the adjoining public highway. There's been no objection from the contaminated land officer, subject to the provision of conditions. There has been no objection from the natural environment team, subject to the inclusion of conditions. And there's been no objection from the tree and countryside officer based on the existing hedgerow being retained. Norfolk County Council Public Rights of Way team have objected to the proposal, stating that the site will be via the public right of way known as Harling Footpath 1, which does not offer any means of public vehicular access, and it is not maintainable at the public expense to a vehicular standard. An increase in vehicular use of this unmade track will result in a loss of amenity value for the public right-of-way users, as well as causing additional conflict between these users and vehicles, resulting in an increase in danger and inconvenience to all highway users. In terms of the public consultation, 10 letters of representation have been received. 3 in support and 7 objections, details of which are included within the officer report. Further comments have since been received since the officer report was published, and these are included within a supplementary and have been taken into account as part of the assessment of the application. In terms of the principle of development of the site, it is located approximately 67 metres to the north of the settlement boundary of Harling. The development outside of the boundaries of local service centres, which Harling is, will normally be resisted where the local plan housing target is provided for, which is the case in this instance. Policy How 3 does state that where the local plan does not identify sufficient sites to achieve the housing target, then further development will be allowed, subject to being supported by relevant policies within the development plan and meeting a set of criteria, which is also included within the officer's report. The latest figures for Harling indicate that the total number of dwellings allocated for the village, made up of completions, commitments and allocations within the neighbourhood plan, equate to 261 new dwellings, with a target to be met over the plan period is 250. As a result, the principle of new development is not supported. Notwithstanding this, even if the housing target had not been met, the settlement boundary is not considered to be immediately adjacent to the application site. So in light of those factors and the fact that the council has a 5-year housing land supply, the principle of a new dwelling in this location, in this particular instance, is not accepted. In terms of the design, character and appearance, on the west side of Fen Lane, the host dwelling, currently known as Tom's Meadow, and measuring approximately 9.7 metres in height at its highest point, is sited approximately 29.1 metres away from an existing historic cottage known as The Cottage, measuring approximately 6.29 metres in height at its highest point. Given the significant height and scale variations between the two dwellings, the space in between is considered important in terms of preserving the special character of the historical cottage. Just like to add, it's not listed, but it does have historical considerations to it. The current proposal would further erode this gap. It is considered that the construction of a new dwelling as proposed in the location shown, which would be in close proximity to the host dwelling, approximately 6.1 metres from building to building, and to an existing historical cottage, approximately 8.9 metres from building to building, would not integrate to a high degree of compatibility with the surrounding area in terms of design, style, massing, materials and scale. It would therefore fail to reinforce the positive and distinctive local character and amenity, having a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the immediate vicinity, contrary to policies COM 1 and Gen 2 of the Breckland Local Plan. In terms of the impact on amenity, no adverse impacts have been identified, having due regard to policy COM 3 of the Breckland Local Plan. And sorry, I've just lost my place. In conclusion, the application is recommended for refusal on 4 grounds, including highway safety concerns, public rights of way concerns, design and impact on character and appearance, and the principle of development not being accepted, having due regard to the council's up-to-date development plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If you go back to main screen, please. Thank you. Well, our first speaker is Steve Kunze, who's an objector. We have you on here somewhere. Oh, there you are, sir. You have 3 minutes. You need to unmute yourself first, sir.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yes.
Yes, hey, off you go, sir.
My name is Stephen Kuntzer. I live at Whitebird Farm, Fen Lane, approximately 200 metres north of the application site. I've submitted written objections to the application, extracts of which are contained in the case officer's report. Fen Lane is a public footpath and takes the form of an unmade track, it does not benefit from any public funded maintenance. Any maintenance which is carried out relies on the voluntary individual efforts of a few Fen Lane residents. With my written objections, I sent photographs to show the condition of the lane when I moved here in 2013 and its condition 6 years later. I've attached to this statement further copies of those photographs and additional photographs taken last week. It is indisputable that the surface of the lane has degraded substantially over the past 7 years. I believe this is due to construction traffic associated with recent housing developments in the lane, the additional traffic movements associated with those developments, and a general increase in traffic consequent upon the national move towards online shopping. Each development consent contained a condition requiring the applicant to repair any damage to the lane caused during construction and to undertake routine maintenance. Whilst every applicant has, to a greater or lesser degree, complied with that condition, the problem is that the surface of the lane is so fragile, once it has been damaged, no amount of repair remains in situ for very long. I know this for a fact because periodically, weather permitting, with a tractor, I drag a box scraper up and down the lane in an attempt to stop potholes from becoming too deep and to encourage rainwater runoff. Rarely does the surface remain compacted for more than a week or so. My car has suffered suspension damage several times, and I'm aware that other residents have had similar experiences. I'm making this statement to highlight an existing and very real problem which already seriously impacts upon the day-to-day lives of all Fen Lane residents. The application has the potential to make an already very bad situation significantly worse, and given the several development control reasons identified in the case officer's report why consent should be refused, I consider that a decision to grant consent would be extremely unreasonable. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We now have Thomas Wheatley, please, who's the agent. So I'll try to find you on my screen. 3 minutes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. I am Thomas Wheatley of Park Planning Services, and I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Lynn, a retired couple residing in Breckland for 46 years, and they've lived in East Harlem for 26 of those. And they've asked me to read this, a personal letter from them, as they were unable to attend today. The application seeks full planning permission for a detached dwelling to ensure us to downsize from our 5-bedroom house to a smaller bed, 3-bed, and still reside on our garden land. The 3 reasons why we were encouraged to do this was: 1, a suggestion from successive housing ministers for elderly couples to downsize to provide larger family homes. 2nd, the permission granted to our neighbours at the cottage for a detached house and garage in their garden. And 3rdly, and permission granted directly opposite to the plot for a large detached house, carport, garage and annex, which makes this a bit an infill plot. This is a self-build application for ourselves, for which there is a assessed need in the Breckland, and we're actually on the self-build register ourselves. The property is within walking distance of several local services, community facilities and employment opportunities in the village, which is an important sustainability benefit. There would be on average around 6 traffic movements, and that was according to Norfolk County Council, associated with a proposal of this size, which isn't a significant amount on a daily basis. All of the recent applications on Fen Lane have also highlighted the visibility which is on Quidnam Road, and they've still been approved, some even at appeal, and as a matter of consistency, surely this should remain the case for our application. This dwelling would not result in any overlooking, overshadowing or loss of privacy to the surrounding dwellings, and we've also taken a lot of care and consideration in the design process to make sure that it was sited in appropriate location, so it didn't do this. As far as impact on the character of Fen Lane, is concerned, we would like to make it clear that this is the building up. This is not a conservation area, and there are some people that seem to think it is. It is a mix of 20 or so dwellings along, ranging with different styles from 1960s small bungalows to larger properties, some up to 6,000 square feet, and a few self-built homes, including a Scandinavian type modern lodge house and another modern self-built property under construction on Fen Lane. And none of the properties are listed on Fen Lane. To summarise, this is a self-built application to ensure us to downsize in our own garden land, and we respectfully asked that the committee afford us the same consideration and support you've given others on Fen Lane. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Nunn, please, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, committee. I'm speaking in support of the application. I was asked to go and visit this particular site by the applicants and indeed by the parish council. As I walked along the track, I can completely see what Mr. Coots is saying. The track is somewhat potholed, but despite that, I could clearly see as I walked along that the site that is being proposed sits there and looks exactly like a plot that could be developed. It's already been fenced and, dare I say, is in a fairly untidy state at the moment, with building materials and various other things stored upon it. And when I presented this to the chairman's panel a while back, I know I think it was the chairman himself raised the issue of the carport being overly large, sitting at the front of the plot near the driveway. And having spoken to the applicants, they're quite happy, if that was still an issue for the committee, that property be reduced to a single story with a hipped roof at front and back to allow better visibility for the small cottage, which I believe has been mentioned by the officers as being an issue. Now, I completely understand that the village of East Harling has had a lot of houses, as you say, over 260 recently. I think in total, actually, it's nearer 400 if we go to the last local plan. That said, the parish council carried out a survey which said that much as they don't want any more large-scale industrial developments, which is predominantly what they've received recently, what they are in favour of is small individual character properties sporadically built around the community. And I think this property fits that bill. Mr. Chair, I don't think I need to say a great deal more than that, other than I do support it. I do think it would fit in. Oh, I should just point out the house that we recently passed that's being redeveloped directly above the site on the right-hand side of the track as you go along is close on 6,000 square feet. It's a colossal property and actually towers above all three of the properties, the one that's being proposed, the cottage, and indeed Tom's Meadow itself. Absolutely huge property, which I have to say I was slightly surprised that it got permission to that scale. But I think on the basis of that, and on the basis that previous properties have been passed on appeal down this track, I continue to support the application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, it's open to questions from members. No questions? Okay, fine. So can I just have a show of hands that you've heard and understood the presentation, please? Just show of your hands. Thank you. Okay. So for reference of Harling, Tom's Meadow application 3PL 2020-1201. Your officer's recommendation on this is one of refusal. Julie, could you take the roll call for the application for refusal, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson?
For
refusal or?
For the officer's recommendation, yeah.
Thank you.
For refusal, thank you.
Councillor Attewell?
For.
Councillor Bowes? For. Councillor Brame?
Against.
Councillor Chapman Allen?
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
For refusal.
Councillor Crane?
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Digan?
For the recommendation.
Councillor Gilbert,
For the recommendation.
Councillor Martin,
For refusal.
Councillor Kybird.
For the recommendation.
Thank you. That's 10 for the refusal and 1 against. Thank you.
1 against. That's what I made it. Okay. Thanks very much for this application, Rhys Harling. The recommendation is followed through for refusal. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. We're now going to Thompson, 3PL 2020-1215 PIP. We have our guests in here now. I do apologise, gentlemen, that you've been held in the waiting room. I trust you've enjoyed reading the magazines that are supplied. We've got Angus Welsh yes, I can see you there from the Parish Council. John Stanley, who's an objector. Yes, I've got you there. David Jones, who's the agent, and Councillor Cohen or Philip Cohen. Which are you today? I can't hear you because you're on mute.
Sorry about that, Chairman. I'm Councillor Cowan today. I'm your ward member.
We've got you there. Okay, it just had Pete Cowan in the corner, and that's why I wasn't 100% sure. Okay, thank you. We'll hand this over to our officer, Tom Donnelly. Oh, I can see you. Yeah, Tom, it's over to you, please, for the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application, members, you see before you is for a permission in principle on land to the east of Marpit Road in Thompson for up to 4 dwellings. So here we have an aerial photograph of the application site in context of the surrounding area with the application site outlined in red there. You'll see that the site is bounded to the east and to the north by other residential development. And an image here of the settlement boundary for Thompson shown in relation to the application site. As you can see, the settlement boundary runs along the southern side of Mill Road here, and therefore it joins the red line of the application site. Here we have a location plan, just showing the entirety of the site outlined in red there. And a couple of site photographs there. So in terms of the actual assessment of the application, as I say, it's only for permission in principle. So the 3 factors that we are considering are the location of the site, the land use being proposed, and also the amount of development being proposed. As I say, in this case, up to 4 dwellings. In terms of the assessment of the proposal, it is being considered against the requirements of policy HOU 04 of the local plan. So we have the key criteria of the site being immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. Then the 4 following criteria, which are the development is of an appropriate scale of design, would not lead to the number of dwellings in the settlement increasing by significantly more than 5%. The design contributes to preserving and, where possible, enhancing the historic nature and connectivity of the community. And finally, that the development avoids the coalescence of settlements. All other factors and technical details would need to be considered at a stage of a later application. As I say, we are looking solely at the principle of development today. The criteria as found in policy HOU 04 are considered to be satisfied, and accordingly, we are making a recommendation of approval on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, we go over to our speakers. We've got go back to full screen, please. Thank you. Okay, we've got Angus Welsh, please, from the Parish Council. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thompson Village is designated unsustainable. Employment opportunities and access to public transport are extremely limited. Dependency on a car is critical. Adding a development of 4 properties will exacerbate the designated unsustainability. Thompson has evolved slowly over many centuries with overwhelmingly low density housing in an open dispersed layout in linear form following the roads. This proposal is completely out of keeping in terms of scale and density. A PIP addresses land use, location and amount of development. In terms of land use, the proposal would be a harmful and unacceptable intrusion into the open countryside, partially filling a green space, which contributes massively to the character and appearance of this area. In terms of location, the site is situated outside of, but immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. It is therefore within the countryside and contrary to the local plan, which requires developments to be appropriate and justified for the locality. We remain very concerned that highways seem to ignore that the proposal threatens to place junctions in immediate proximity to a 4-road confluence, which already challenges drivers with an unusual combination of crossroad and right-left angle bend. With no pavement, the roads are shared and incidents are inevitable and utterly predictable. In terms of amount of development, the local plan allows a 5% increase of properties through until 2036, a total of 7. 4 have been agreed already, so a further 4 from this proposal means the plan is exceeded, albeit by 1. The proposal is not promoting sustainable development. Councillors, this proposal intends to shoehorn 4 dwellings into an area half the size of that dismissed by the planning inspector in the recent appeal that itself had proposed a total of 6 dwellings for the whole plot. The physicality of the plot has not changed 1 iota since, so surely the judgments of the inspector remain valid for this PIP, and I quote 3 of them. I have already found that the proposal would cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the area. The proposed development would be contrary to policy HOU 04 by virtue of its conflict with criterion 1, which requires development proposals to be of an appropriate scale and designed to the settlement. The proposal would not accord with the environmental objective of the framework. This is a matter I give significant weight. Quotes end. In summary, the proposed development is not an appropriate scale nor designed for the existing settlement. It does not contribute to, preserve, nor enhance the historic nature and connectivity of the community and would impact negatively on the environment. A need has not been identified. This PIP conflicts with policy Gen 1235, HOU 2416, Gen 02 and COM 01 of the plan. Thompson Parish Council is unanimous and objects most strongly to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Welsh. We now have John Stanley, please, who's an objector. 3 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon. I am neither paid by rich clients nor elected, but I speak on behalf of the villagers. I face the land in question. I wait till the traffic sounds of the school runs and hope the meadow's water table will permit our toilet to clear each day. Village houses flanking the site use private drains. Our soakaways depend upon dispensing into the waterlogged field, and does the land with the same with the rain and the road. The last failed application tried evading this, proposing raised concrete rafts and a water tank to capture land drainage, to later release into field ditches and land not owned. Despite playing recommendations, you understood real life and voted 9-2 against. Their first application utilised Marpit Road, but Breckland declined that too, considering it unsuitable. So they turned to the less desirable Mill Road. The village approach is straight, inducing universal speeding, and appears to continue, but Mill Road swings 90 degrees round a blind corner, with residents beyond facing real dangers, moving slowly in and out of driveways. A police stat states that concentrated drivers required 2 seconds to react, and at 15 miles an hour, 9.2 meters to stop. Locals, school, and increasingly delivery traffic all far exceed this speed. Every 30 seconds, morning and afternoon, Mill Road carries fast, erratic school traffic, harassed parents and children, nationally recognised as a high-risk accident period. Highway's simplistic statement fails to reflect real life. The applicant proclaimed any build on this site would help village businesses prosper. No one bothered to establish that Thompson has no shop, no streetlights, one bus a week, no pavement over a 2.7-mile walk to the nearest shop, no school vacancies, and a post office run from home by a lady in her 90s. Just 4 minutes away, you have granted 180 new builds, providing all the required amenities within a safe walking distance. However much a short, fat actor with a limp spends on smart interview clothes, on a CV polished by expensive advisors, he will never capture the role of James Bond, because in truth, he isn't suitable. I believe this is the applicant's 5th attempt to impose building on this small patch of our building, and every single time it has been declined, withdrawn, even rejected at appeal. The simple truth is this land is not, and however many more times they try, will never be suitable for development. We, the villagers, now trust in your judgment.
I've become mute. Thank you, Mr. Stanley, for your time. We've now got David Jones, please, who is the agent. 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. This application is for permission in principle and seeks to reflect any comments made by the inspector during the recent appeal. We would like to remind the committee that as this is a permission in principle application, members must only consider the location of the development, the proposed land use, and the amount of development. It is considered that this modest development of 4 dwellings is compliant with policy. In terms of housing numbers, we remain in agreement with the appeal inspector, as per your officer's report, that only 3 dwellings have been approved since the adoption of the local plan. As such, the approval of this application would take the number of dwellings approved to 7, totaling the 5% growth required for Thompson. As identified in the indicative layout supplied, 4 dwellings can be provided on site in a manner which reflects the local surroundings and density. The dwellings will front onto either Mill Road or Marlpit Road and will reflect the linear pattern of development in the area. It is noted that there remain concerns in relation to highway safety, surface water drainage, and ecology. Although these matters are not for consideration with this application, we would like to remind the committee that this is a revision of a full application, albeit for a lesser number of dwellings, and we do have a full suite of documents that confirm there are no technical issues with the proposed development of this site. The revised application responds positively to all previous concerns raised by the inspector, and the proposal has no outstanding objections from statutory consultees. Our client is committed to delivery of high quality residential development on the site in a prompt and timely manner in order to make a contribution towards boosting the supply of housing in the district and the achievement of sustainable development. The officer has concluded that the principle of development on site satisfies the requirements of policy HOU4 and has recommended the application be granted. I therefore respectfully request that members consider this application favourably. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your time. We have Councillor Cohen, please. 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. You've heard that this applicant and this site has been the subject of applications in the recent past that have either been withdrawn following discussions with officers, refused permission by this committee, and dismissed at appeal by the Planning Inspectorate. This application does nothing to address the concerns expressed by the inspector at the appeal. Furthermore, it is made against the backdrop of very strong local concerns, local knowledge regarding flooding, and a local plan that can demonstrate a robust 5-year housing land supply. Notwithstanding that the Highway Authority have raised no objections, the road geometry, as you've heard, is far from ideal. A blind bend, a crossroads, and a heavily trafficked junction, particularly at peak times for drop-off and pick-up at the village school. So is there anything different about this application that would make this committee vote differently from that which it did before? And I would venture to suggest that it does not. It does not add to the sense of community of the village. It takes away from the village a key aspect of the open space at its heart. The scale, form and character are alien to the village setting. It will add to the flooding nightmare with which villagers already contend. And it is unsafe in its relationship to the highway geometry. I'm reminded of the phrase attributed to Robert the Bruce. If at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. In this instance, trying again, but utilising a route that gives little or no information on which to base a decision, allows for a wide interpretation to be employed in the event of a successful application outcome, and would leave a sword of Damocles hanging over the villagers in this part of Thompson. Whilst planning decisions are seen against policy and thus are often very black and white in their interpretation, there are many instances where shades of grey must carry significant weight. This is one of those instances, and the unfortunate positioning in drafting the local plan red line on the south side of the road, contrary to that which occurs around this part of the village, appears to give the applicant a get out of jail card, but this carried no weight with this committee before, or indeed the inspector who dismissed the previous appeal. I urge members to listen to the concerns of residents and the parish council, whose lives will be adversely affected if this application is approved. Appreciate the development at any price is unacceptable, and vote to overturn the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's open to questions from members. I've got Councillor Attawell, please.
Well, I didn't think I was going to hear about Damocles, Robert the Bruce and James Bond all in one afternoon on one application, so that's amused me greatly. I have some concerns about this application. I'm failing to see, in regard to policy HOU04, I'm failing to see how we can possibly say that this would comply with paragraph 3 of that, which says, the design contributes to preserving and, where possible, enhancing the historic nature and connectivity of communities and the development avoids coalescence of settlements. Well, as it's just a PIP application and I can't see what the houses are going to look like, I can't possibly say with any certainty whether it's going to contribute to preserving and, where possible, enhancing the historic nature of the village. So to me, I don't have enough information and I'm against this application. I think if the applicant wants to put a full application in with all the detail, we can consider it.
Rebecca, please.
Yes, unfortunately, with a PIP application, we can't insist on further information. Therefore, members, you are going to have to make your representation, your decision based on the information that is in front of you. And it would be for technical details to check the detailed design. And at that stage, if you don't feel the design is appropriate to the surrounding area, then it would be at that stage to make that assessment. What officers have done here is they've looked at the potential amount of dwellings within the application site. They've looked at the spacing around the site, which maintains the majority of the open space in that area. And therefore, they've made their recommendation based on that they think 4 dwellings in a linear development could be achieved. So it's the same, members, as if you had an outline application for the principle of 4 dwellings and you were getting the reserve matters later. Of course, members, you can disagree on those regards and say that that open space contributes significantly to the wider character of the area, and any development in this location would have a detrimental impact. But officers have reviewed the information, they've looked at the appeal inspector's decision, and they've regarded that the reduction in dwellings from 6 to 4 and the reduction in the space maintains the wider open space and the character of the area. And it is on that basis that you need to make your decision as officers, as members of the committee, sorry, I'm the officer, members of the committee, and not, you cannot require further information, unfortunately, as frustrating as it is, members.
Councillor Attawell, did you have a further question? As much as I'd love to have you on mute all afternoon, I think you better go off it.
Well, if you don't like, don't like my questions, please do. The council solicitor, am I right in saying then that paragraph 3 of HOU 4, really that's a subjective view for members to take. The other paragraphs in there, you can quantify them somehow, but that one is something that we could take a subjective view on, because I don't believe that I've got enough information, and I certainly don't think the officers had enough information to say this complies with HOU 4. Would I be right in saying that I could take that as a subjective view on paragraph 3?
You would be right, Councillor Atterwill, albeit subject to what Rebecca has just said, and that could be something dependent upon what comes up later on if this was granted, that you could refuse later on. But at the moment, because we have not got that information, it isn't something that we could refuse it for. Albeit Rebecca has spoken about other factors for you to take into account that are subjective.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Bowes, and then Councillor Kybird, Councillor Chapman-Allen. Councillor Bowes first, please.
Thank you. So if we granted this in principle, does that guarantee that any further application will be limited to 4? Because I don't like these. I mean, I'd much rather see an outline or a full application in this sort of area.
You've got no argument from me, Councillor Bowles. Yes, we can do one or two things. We can't add conditions, but the permission in principle is for 4. So that is what they've got, up to 4 dwellings permission in principle for. We can't add conditions at this stage, only at technical detail stage.
Thank you. Councillor Kybird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In determining land use under permission in principle, are we allowed to take into account flooding issues?
Unfortunately not. That would again be at technical details stage, where they'd have to submit the relevant information, and at that stage, if they cannot demonstrate that it would not result in flood risk elsewhere without suitable mitigation, we could refuse at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman-Allen, please, and then Councillor Crane.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that villages have to have a small amount of development to keep them alive, but 4 houses is a lot for a small village like Thompson. Could I ask the agent, do Blue Oak developments, do they own the whole field?
Yes, they do own the whole field, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. So we are dealing with this application for 4 houses at the moment, depending on how it goes. And hearing what Rebecca just said, I hope that they would not come back for further houses on this field. And my other question was about flooding, Chairman, but Rebecca says it's not the right time to ask the question. Thank you, Chairman.
That's right. Thank you. Councillor Crane, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one. If the committee was minded to go with the recommendation, would this mean that it would come back to committee for the committee to look at the style of housing that would go on it or not? The thing is, I think that Thompson is quite a unique little village. It's a very special little village, and it would be awful to go with the recommendation and then find actually we have left Thompson with some pretty miserable looking buildings. Thank you. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Well, I would hope that my officers would never leave a village with some pretty miserable looking buildings, but I appreciate your comments and concerns. Obviously, as with all applications, the technical details would follow the scheme of delegation. So in that regard, we'll follow the scheme of delegation as with all applications. And if the result of the scheme of delegation is it needs to be heard back at planning committee, then that would be the result. But I'm more than happy to facilitate that, obviously complying with the scheme of delegation.
Thank you. Councillor Brame, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that we're always saying that we look at each of these on its merits. I'm finding it very difficult to know whether I can look at what the appeal court said last time in relationship to this, because there doesn't seem to be anything in this particular application that stops the or improves what was not allowed last time. Am I allowed to take that into consideration or not?
Rebecca, please.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. So the appeal inspector did identify an impact on the character of the area. Like I say, this is a revised proposal. Obviously, we've only got limited matters that we can consider this time, unlike last time. But what we've set out to you as officers, that the reduction of dwellings from 6 to 4 and the reduction of land, creating greater open space and land around the development site, we consider that the impact on the character of the area isn't as significant as the previous development, which was refused and the inspector agreed with. Absolutely, members, with your knowledge of the local area, if you want to take a different view with regards to that potential green space and the landscape impact, that's obviously within your prerogative to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it from members. So can I just ask a show of hands, please, from the members that you've heard and understood the presentation? Thank you. Okay, so on this item for Thompson, 3PL 2020-1215 PIP, your officer's recommendation on this one is one of approval. So could you please say approval if you wish to go, or against? Julie, would you please take the roll on this?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson.
Approval.
Councillor Atterwill.
Against.
Councillor Bowes.
Against.
Councillor Brame.
Against.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Crane.
Against the recommendation.
Councillor Digan.
Against.
Councillor Gilbert.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
Against the recommendation.
And Councillor Kybird.
Against the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 2 who vote for approval and 9 against the recommendation of approval.
Thanks very much. Oh, hang on a sec. I'll take the Councillor Atwell for it because I need to ask from the floor. Councillor Atwell, please.
I was going to suggest, Chairman, that we refuse the application because it doesn't, in our view, comply with paragraph 3 of policy HOU04. We don't think that the design contributes to preserving and, where possible, enhancing the historic nature and connectivity of the community.
Okay, are we okay with that? Are we, Rebecca? Coming back, please, Rebecca, yes.
To suggest what I've heard from members today, that they're concerned about the impact on the landscape, and that could be contrary to that paragraph 3, but the design you don't have in front of you, members. And it would be wrong, in my view, and you can completely disagree with me, to add the word design to the reason for refusal on the grounds that you haven't got a design to consider at this stage, but you are concerned, which I absolutely hear, with regards to that paragraph, and perhaps even ENVO 5, I want to say, which is your landscape policy, that you're concerned about the impact on the landscape and the use of development in that open space, in that otherwise open green space. But obviously, members, it's your reason, not mine.
Yeah. Councillor Brame, I saw your hand up. Everyone's putting their hands up. So Councillor Brame, then Councillor Gilbert, then Councillor Crane. Councillor Brame first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we put in there that as a committee, we don't feel that this is an improvement to the village of Thompson, in complete agreement with the appeal that was upheld prior?
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There's somebody who knows that road very well, and that corner in particular, could we also include that the refusal on the grounds of highway safety?
Unfortunately, Councillor Gilbert, that is not a matter for consideration at this time, so it would be very unwise to include that in the recommendation.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think as Mr. Horn would say, we don't need to gild the lily. Who else did I have? Councillor Crane, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was going to say what Rebecca said, really. I think take guidance from her. I think she heard what those of us who voted against the recommendation felt about the Thompson and that particular area of Thompson. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Horn, can I take that as that we stick with that agreement, or do you want do you want to take a roll call again?
No, we do need, we now have forwarded, proposed by Councillor Atterwill a reason. That's been supplemented, so we know what it is. I have yet to hear Councillor Atterwill's suggestion as supplemented by Rebecca seconded, and when it is, we vote again.
Yep. So did we have a seconder for Councillor Atterwill, please? I thought Roy put his hand up. Oh, we've got Councillor Chapman-Allen was first up. Councillor Chapman-Allen seconded that. Julie, can you take the roll again, please? And members, can you say that you are against the recommendation, or you are, no, it's coming from the floor now. So you want to agree to refuse the application, agree to refuse.
Thank you, Chair.
Take it, Julia, see how we go.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Against the amendment, or?
Yeah, I'll agree the amendment.
Agree the amendment. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Atterwill.
I agree with the amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Brame.
Agree the amendment.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Clark.
I now agree with the amendment.
Councillor Crane.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Digan.
Agree the amendment.
Councillor Gilbert.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Martin.
Agree to refuse.
And Councillor Kybird.
Agree to refuse.
Thank you.
That's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. This item for Thompson 3PL 2020-1215 PIP has been refused unanimously by this committee. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. Okay, so that's our schedule of planning applications. So item 10 on your agenda of today is applications determined by Executive Director of Place. Of course, it's there for your information. Also for your information, item 11 are the appeal decisions. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, for this afternoon, I close this meeting for the recording. If you'd like to just all hold on for one moment once we